also going to get us live on Facebook. See if I did all the things the way I was supposed to. Okay, I think we're good to go. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We're doing our monthly webinar series. And today we are joined by Mr. Michael Liner from Liner Legal, who is a fantastic resource in the Social Security disability space. He has a great amount of knowledge and experience and is able to kind of chat with us a little bit about what it takes to qualify for disabilities, some of the hurdles that you might face in that process, and just some great resources. So thank you so much for joining us today, Michael, and I'll let you go ahead and get started. I do want to just say real quick, for those that are joining us either on Zoom or Facebook Live, feel free to ask questions, chime in. We're happy to make this a discussion. So go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, and thank you for reiterating that, Lauren. I am going to share my screen in a minute so you guys can see some slides. But if anybody who's, I guess, on the Zoom version, because that's probably the only way that I could hear you, wants to chime in with a question, feel free to just cut me off. Lauren, I don't know if you're monitoring the Facebook Live chat, but if there's questions in there, I guess you could read them out loud to me too. I want this to be beneficial for you guys because when I give broad topic seminars like this, I realize that I'm trying to cover such a huge topic. And what's really important is meeting you where you're at and finding out the information that you need as individuals because no two people are the same or going through the exact same scenario. So please feel free to chime in and let me know how I can make this more useful for you. I just want to thank you, Lauren, for inviting me to talk to the group today and share a little bit about Social Security disability. I'm going to, oh, Lauren, it says that I need to send you a request so I can share. I think I did. Okay, great. We did that. And now I just need to find on my screen. Sorry, I think I need to change something here so that it's what comes up. Uh, Hold on, folks. I apologize. I had the PowerPoint. It's not a PowerPoint, but I had the presentation right here, and now it is somehow closed out. Give me just a second to load it back up. Um, I can talk while I'm doing this. Um, so By introduction, my name is Michael Liner. I am a Social Security disability attorney. I founded my law firm, Liner Legal, back in 2013. All we do is help people through this long and frustrating process of applying for Social Security disability benefits. Hold on, let me make sure I get this right. So I've almost got this up and then we'll be good to go. Here we go. All right, now I'm going to share the screen again, and we'll all be in the same place, I hope. Share. There we go. Lauren, are you seeing what I'm seeing now?
Yes, I see it. Perfect.
Okay, great. And I just changed the screen. Can you see that I changed the screen because sometimes it doesn't follow?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. There we go. Thank you guys for your patience while I got that set back up. Um, my goal today is to give you some basic information about disability that I think applies to people who are going through the journey of applying for benefits, regardless of where you were. But like I said, I want to individualize this and make it as useful to you guys individually as possible. So please feel free to cut me off with questions. There are some unique things about brain injuries that I think factor into Social Security disability cases that I want to make sure that you understand. But what I'll do is I'll make sure that I leave plenty of time at the end, especially so I can answer some questions here. I didn't have a brain injury myself. But my story actually does closely track what a lot of people who I think are probably working with the brain injury awareness team track, which is as a child, I had epilepsy, and a lot of the same um, limitations that people have with brain injuries are what people with epilepsy experience. And I can talk about that more, but it certainly, my history as a child with epilepsy certainly impacted my choice of careers. Actually, there's no question that it impacted my choice of careers, just because um, it is very hard to understand how helpless you feel to avail yourself to this big government process while being sick if you haven't experienced that ultimate helplessness feeling yourself. I even as an adult, there's no question that some of the most difficult times I've ever had in my life were as a child, literally having a seizure, but unable to communicate with other people, having the awareness that I was having a seizure, but trying to, I would have them in that little period of time between when you're awake and when you're asleep. And I would know that I was having one, but I couldn't speak. They muted me, and I would try to, as best as I could, almost injure myself by flinging myself into my bedroom wall so that my brother, who slept 2 rooms down, could hear me banging in the wall and alert my parents, whose room was on the other side of our house. Um, and even just thinking about it now, like that experience of what I went through between the ages of 7 and 13, um, that's what it feels like to live with a health issue in the United States, anywhere. But then you go through this process, and I'll talk about the Social Security disability process, which tells most people that they're not disabled enough and they don't qualify. And so that's kind of where I get a lot of my inspiration from. So there's two main types of disability benefits that people are applying for, and I'm going to talk about how they're similar, how they're different, just to give you a general understanding, to give you a little bit of the lingo, right? So the first type of disability benefit, the most common type of disability benefit, is called Social Security disability benefits. It is a benefit that is based not only on your inability to work, those are the medical requirements. And as you'll see, the medical requirements for the two types of disability benefits that we're going to talk about are the same. But it's based on where these types of benefits differ is in the technical requirements and the non-medical requirements. Social Security disability benefits is based on your work history. Generally speaking, in order to receive Social Security disability, you have to have worked and paid into Social Security for 5 of the 10 years immediately prior to becoming disabled. Now, that threshold is a little bit lower for individuals who are younger than 32. The reason why you don't have to have worked as much before the age of 32 is you just wouldn't have had an opportunity to. Generally speaking, if you're under the age of 32, you have to have worked for half of the time between whatever age you are and the age of 22. Okay. So if you are 26 years old, you don't have to have paid into Social Security for 5 of the last 10 years. They're not looking at your work history going back to when you were 16 years old. You have to have paid into Social Security for 2 of the 4 years immediately prior to becoming disabled. But you earn work credits by working and paying into Social Security. If you're working in a traditional, W-2 income job like most people in Ohio are, if you look at the pay stubs that your employer gives you, there's a couple different things at the end for deductions that a lot of people don't really understand what they mean and what they're going for. But three of them sort of relate to this global picture of Social Security. Okay. Two of them say FICA on them. Okay. The portion that people expect that they're contributing to is their retirement benefits. That's one of those tabs. The second tab, which is a smaller amount that comes out of every one of your checks, actually goes towards buying insurance for you in case you become disabled. And that is why Social Security is an earned benefit. Social Security disability is an earned benefit. It is something that you have earned through having enough work credits. The third deduction that's there is your Medicare, so that you're eligible for Medicare benefits. And Medicare comes along with Social Security disability benefits if you're deemed disabled by Social Security. Now, one thing that's important because you don't become eligible to receive Medicare immediately. You have to be in a Social Security pay status for 2 years to receive Medicare benefits from disability, as opposed to traditional Medicare when people receive it just because they've turned 65 years old. What that means is because Social Security disability benefits has what's called a 5 month waiting period. Usually, someone has to be disabled for at least 29 months, almost 2.5 years, before they're going to receive Medicare. That poses a challenge for a lot of people. That may trigger some questions, but I want to make sure you understand that because a lot of people get to the end of the road with a disability case. Maybe they're approved and they assume that they're going to be getting not only a monthly check, but that they're going to be receiving Medicare benefits. And they're surprised to find out that they might not be eligible for Medicare for another year, year and a half, depending upon how long of a window of time it is from 2 years between when they're approved and being in a Social Security payment status for 2 years. So that's important. Those are the basic requirements for SSD benefits. The other disability benefit that's offered by Social Security is called SSI, Supplemental Security Income. It is not based on your work history. You don't need to have worked for a single day of your life to receive SSI benefits. Instead, though, it's based on having very limited income and very limited resources available to you. A good way to think of SSI benefits is that it is a federal poverty benefit for people who are disabled. And it has very low maximum threshold for assets and resources to be eligible for SSI. If you have more than $2,000 in resources for a single individual, or $3,000 if you're a married couple, then Social Security will say you're over-resourced and not eligible for SSI. Now, where does that $2,000 or $3,000 come from? It can come from the value of bank accounts. It can come from stocks, bonds that you have, a 401k. What they don't look at, though, and this is important because these are the questions that are most common, they're not going to look at the value of one home if you're living in it. It can't be an investment property, but they're not going to look at the value of a home that you're living in, regardless of its value. And they're not going to look at the value of your vehicle if you are single or even your spouse's vehicle if you're married. But SSI requires that you have very limited income in your household for you to be eligible to receive. It doesn't come with Medicare, it comes with Medicaid instead. So the difference between SSD and SSI benefits is in the non-medical requirements. One benefit is based on your work history, the other benefit is based on having limited income and resources available. Both benefits, however, require that you have a medical impairment or combination of impairments that are going to last for at least 12 months. That's so crucial. Say you're in a terrible car accident, and which is common as a comorbidity with TBIs. A lot of people, will have significant accidents, and that's what leads to them, having a traumatic brain injury. And you break your knee, you fracture your knee or your back. But through treatment, aggressive treatment and recovery, you're back to a level of some functioning where you could do some work, at least for a part of your impairments, in 8 months, 11 months even. Social Security will say that you're not disabled. You have to have an inability to work for at least 12 months or more. Okay, that which is really, really important. Now, they're not, the question is not whether you could do part-time work. The question is whether you could do full-time work. So if maybe you've regained enough functioning that you could work 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week, but there's strong medical support that you wouldn't be able to work on a full-time basis, that then you might still qualify. Social Security is looking at your ability to do full-time work. Okay. But the key for a successful disability case, as you'll kind of see throughout the theme of this whole presentation, is everything comes back to the quality of your medical records. I want you to remember me saying this. People don't get approved for disability benefits because of what's actually wrong with them, because of what's actually wrong with you. People get approved for disability benefits because of what you can prove through your medical records is wrong with you. So you experiencing an inability to focus, concentrate, stay on task, be reliable for something like work attendance without documentation to support it, without, medical records that show that the origin of that functional limitation is a TBI, without complaints to your doctors about your inability to do those things, without hopefully a medical store statement from your doctor confirming your inability to focus or concentrate or be a consistent employee. The real world ability to not do those things doesn't matter. What's key is what you can prove. So, your medical records, the documentation that you keep before, while applying for disability, and even after being awarded benefits, because you're going to need to show that you have continued eligibility, that your disability continues to prevent you from being able to work, is so crucial throughout your journey with Social Security disability benefits. Now, there's many different ways that you can be approved for disability. I kind of started with the most common way just now, which is talking about your functional limitations. What you need to prove through your medical records is that there's no work that you can do, that you would be unable to learn a new task, that you would be unable to interact even occasionally with coworkers or supervisors, that you couldn't maintain enough attendance, or that you would be not able to focus and concentrate enough to maintain work. But before we even get to the evaluation of your functioning, Social Security does have something which is called a listing that covers traumatic brain injuries. There's a lot of legalese on this slide. I put this here more for reference than me thinking that you seeing that Social Security has a traumatic brain injury listing is going to be overwhelmingly helpful to you, but there are some objective criteria. Well, there's an objective standard which is made up of subjective criteria. That's where it gets derailed a lot, that Social Security looks at. But somebody can be found disabled for Social Security after a TBI if they have evidence that even after even more than 3 months after their TBI, they continue to have very significant. Now, here's where, and this isn't on the slide because it would confuse people if we put this on here. But the way that they rate somebody for a TBI is Social Security will look at different domains of functioning. They'll look at your ability to concentrate or persist at a task or maintain pace. They'll look at your ability to function socially. They'll look at your ability to adapt to a work setting. But the way that they'll view these things isn't through like some numerical, objective study that you can say, oh, well, clearly I have 4 of these 5 things that are demonstrable through a blood test or an MRI, and so we're going to find that you're disabled. They use language that's so confusing. They say you've got to have at least one marked limitation, or excuse me, one extreme limitation or 2 marked limitations in those domains that I just mentioned: the concentration, persistence and pace, adaptation, social functioning. Now, the problem is in the definition of what it means to have a marked restriction. It's completely subjective. The formal definition for what does marked mean It's not like, well, you just need to show these 9 things. Marked means more than moderate, but less than extreme. All it does is refer to other things. But what it really does is it gives Social Security the ability to weigh in with their own view of what these things mean. And so the person who's adjudicating your case, the person who, if you're applying for disability benefits, is reviewing your records, and it's in their hands to decide whether you're approved or not, it's going to be based on a lot of their own personal feelings, whether they'll find that you have a mild limitation in those domains, a moderate limitation, a marked limitation, or an extreme limitation. And so the most important thing that you can do is not even really worry about what this listing says, which gives a lot of people false hope, but it's really just to focus on reporting your functioning to your doctors. You can do it through treatment logs, through uploading, reports of your daily functioning through electronic portals to your doctors, communicating with your doctors at your ongoing appointments. But the way that brain injuries show up, because it's often there's a lot of subjective rating in them, like this slide talks about memory and concentration problems, headaches, dizziness, fatigue, or overstimulation. We do have ways that we can test things like slower processing. There's some neuropsychological evaluations that can be done, but so many of the ways that TBI shows up can't be measured with numbers or in a truly objective way. So the best thing that you can do is just make sure that you're reporting your daily functioning to your treatment team. Okay. And I think that these next slides are going to reinforce some of the things that I've already said, but it's important to go through. So here's what strengthens a brain injury case. One, like I said before, you've got to have a diagnosis, right? So a medical doctor or a nurse practitioner, or a PA or a psychologist, somebody who has evaluated your condition, done the proper testing. Hopefully, you've got an imaging study that shows that there was some sort of event, but that doesn't always show a TBI. Of course, we all know that. Maybe neurology notes or cognitive evaluations. I just mentioned how important a neuropsychological evaluation, but a proper diagnosis of a TBI, those functional limitations, making sure you're telling your providers about what's wrong through consistent treatment. A diagnosis alone is not enough. That's where I think a lot of people get the wrong idea about what qualifies for Social Security disability or SSI benefits. A lot of people will say to me, and I want to use even another example, not just a TBI, but I'll have a client who will say to me, "Hey, I just got a diagnosis of a bipolar disorder, and I see that Social Security has a listing for that. I'm going to be approved, right? Or I should be approved. I've got a really strong case." My answer is, it depends. You need consistent treatment with proper specialists on an ongoing basis, and that treatment should be documenting how you're limited. Okay, because the diagnosis alone is not enough. What's key is that you have medical records showing that you are so significantly limited that you wouldn't be able to maintain employment. And the way that you do it is through reporting your symptoms and your side effects, okay? So, of course, if you are treating with your doctor for a TBI, they're likely to be asking about, you're going to be reporting your headaches, your brain fog, your cognitive slowing, maybe some physical manifestations of the TBI as well. Side effects from your medications can be important. A lot of the medications that people are given for TBIs or the comorbidities can cause their own health concerns, but make sure that you're reporting those things consistently. I always tell my clients, give real world examples, because if you're applying for disability, it's likely that you're not able to say to your doctor or your therapist or your psychiatrist, you're not able to say to them, well, here's what's happening when I'm working because you're out of work or you're working less, which is why you're applying for disability benefits in the first place. So the example that you might have to give is more, when I'm trying to perform my daily chores for like when I'm doing my laundry. My spouse has to remind me 4 times to get it done. And then when we look at the way that I folded the laundry after I've spent twice as long as I used to spend trying to do that same task, I've done it all wrong and it needs to be corrected. That's a great example of a daily activity and your symptoms from the TBI in a real world example that when you tell your doctors and that ends up in your treatment note, give Social Security the type of information that could help them show that there's really no work that you'd be able to do, but not just telling them that once, telling them that on an ongoing basis. Okay. The biggest barrier that I see, and by the way, we're going to make these slides available to everybody afterwards. I'll make sure that Lauren has them so that she can send them around. That's why I kind of like the way that the team in my office put this together. So it kind of looks like a book. It's something that's easily digestible as opposed to a PowerPoint, which is a little more boring to stare at. Um, but the key to these cases really is the consistency. And not only in what you're reporting to your doctors, but what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. A big idea topic that I want to impress upon you again. There's a couple key points that I'm saying twice, or I'm going to separate out and highlight for you that I think are good for you to know. But being disabled under Social Security rules isn't about your ability to show up for one day of work. It's about your ability to show up for work 8 hours a day, 5 days per week. So you might have really good days. A lot of my clients, regardless of what their health issue is, they're able to work 4 hours a day, but then they experience so much crash that they couldn't work any longer. Or they have as opposed to a smaller block of time in a day. Maybe they have a good day a week where they're able to get a lot of stuff done and live their new normal, but then they have 2 really bad days afterward that are followed by headaches or they're paying the price for the days that they had before. Understanding that disability benefits is not about what you can do on one day, but what you can maintain consistently over the course of a week, a month, a year really should help you with your ability to communicate to your doctors, what's needed to be successful and to win these cases. Okay. But it's not about what you can do once, it's about what you can do on an ongoing basis. A lot of the rest of the information in here I've already kind of woven into the other slides and discussion. I want to explain this process to you, though, of applying for disability benefits. So every disability claim begins with an application. I think that we maybe could have reversed these slides here, but I'm glad that you can see them both at once. If you want to start by looking at what's on the right side of the screen first, that might be more helpful for you. A disability claim begins with an initial application. Um, on the application, Social Security is going to ask you, I want to back up because a lot of people want to know, when should I apply? You should apply as soon as you believe that you'd be unable, like I said earlier, that you'd be unable to work for 12 months or more, and that your earnings are below what Social Security calls SGA. Maybe you're working part-time now. Maybe you're only earning $1,200 a month, and it seems like you're not getting better enough that you'd be able to increase your earnings beyond that. You should apply as soon as you have good faith reason to believe that you would be unable to work and earn more than what Social Security calls SGA or do full-time work for at least 12 months or more. So that's kind of like the before you've applied step. Now, once you've made the decision to apply, there's many different ways that you can do it. Social Security allows you to do the application online. That's the most common way. You still can apply over the phone or by going into a Social Security office. I think they even still have a paper application that they'll mail out to you. But something like 95% of disability applications are filed on the internet now. It's truthfully most convenient to the applicant, especially if you are somebody who has some of the more classic symptoms of TBI, just because it allows you to save your work and then come back in. It might be difficult to sit through a full. I think if you were motivated and you knew what information you needed, which I'll tell you, and you were able to sit there and enter it in, you could get through an application in 45 minutes straight online. But a lot of people, they can't even sit for 45 minutes at a computer to upload a bunch of information. You might need to break that into 3 or 4 sessions. So an online application allows you to do that. Here's the things they're going to ask for on your application. They're going to want to know what are your diagnoses, of course. They're going to want to know what treatment have you received? Who are the doctors, hospitals? What tests have been ordered so that they can get your medical records. If you have a representative, they'll help you with it. And when I see representative, I mean an attorney's office can help you with an application, but they could also help you get your medical records. That's one of the really important things that a lawyer does to help somebody with a disability case. Um, they want to know what medications are you taking, and they want to know about the last 5 years of your work history. So Social Security is not going to ask you on the application about every job you've ever done. They want to know what are the jobs that you've done in the last 5 years. If you have that information available, the stuff that might not be top of mind is who are the doctors you've seen or hospitals you've been to or what testing has been done. Um, and you know your work history in the last 5 years, you're in good shape to get the ball rolling. Okay. And then you can submit that application. Now, after you've applied, Social Security will pretty quickly send you some forms in the mail to fill out. One is called a work history report, which asks additional questions beyond what's on the application about the work that you've done in the last 5 years. And they send out a form that's called an ADL form, an activities of daily living form. Sometimes they call it a function report. Um, it's always called the same form. It's just there's alternate names that people use to describe it. But it's a report that asks about what your daily functioning is. Um, I want to talk about that ADL form because I think it gets overlooked in terms of its importance very often, and it's something that I'm very careful about when I'm helping a client through this process. Nobody gets approved for disability, like I said, because of what is actually wrong with you or because of what you tell Social Security is wrong with you. Remember what I said. You get approved for disability because of what your medical records prove is wrong with you. But you absolutely can be denied because of what the gaps that you leave in the information that you give to Social Security. So what you don't tell them is wrong with you, or what you leave out, or if you overly normalize yourself. So this ADL form, it's like 6 or 7 pages long. It might be 8 pages long, and it asks, can you cook? Can you clean? How much can you lift? Do you have limitations with a bunch of different things? So often when people fill this form out, they rush through it. Why? Because it's a long form. And if you're somebody who's easily discouraged, or you're sick, or you're hurt, and it's hard to do these basic things, filling out an 8 page form doesn't sound like a real attractive thing to have to do. But if you're just quickly checking the boxes on there, and when Social Security asks, do you prepare meals, and you just say yes without explaining anything additional, then their response is great. You can prepare meals, go work at McDonald's. You can do you're able to perform household cleaning. There's a hotel down the street that's hiring for housekeeping, for housekeepers. I'm being a little bit dramatic, but not overly dramatic. Those are the things, the responses that people give or neglect to give right when they fill out, right after they've applied for disability benefits, when they fill out that form, are the most common reasons given in Social Security denials for denying the claim. And not just at first when you apply, but even down the road after you've made it through these appeals. So kind of coming full circle here, the thesis from what I just said is if Social Security sends you that function report, they're not going to approve you because of what you tell them is wrong, but you need to expand upon things. So let me give you a good example. On that form, Social Security says, do you prepare meals? You might prepare meals. The honest answer is yes. But then people skip over answering the next question, which is, how do your limitations affect your ability to prepare meals? A lot of my clients will say things to me like, I batch cook, where, on a day when they're feeling well, they will do a ton of food preparation and then they'll freeze it and they'll leave it in their freezer for a month. Why do they do that? Because they don't know when they're going to feel well enough to cook again. To me, that shows that somebody who might not be reliable to show up to work every day. I've got clients who say things like, "Yeah, I prepare meals, but it's a microwave, what do you call it? A TV dinner. It's a frozen meal, or I just make a bowl of cereal or a sandwich because I can't do more." Or if I try and cook something, I've got to have a chair next to my stove because I can't stand long enough in the kitchen in order to prepare a full meal. Explain those things to Social Security. When they ask you about, do you do your household chores like you're cleaning? Let them know that it takes you 4 times as long now as it used to, and that other people have to come and help you with it or remind you 8 times to do it before it gets done. Those things being in the form isn't going to mean because you wrote it down that Social Security is going to, oh, great, he said that it takes 8 times as long, so we're going to just put an approval stamp on this application. But if you rush through it and you don't say those things, you're almost certainly going to be denied because they'll say, seems to be able to do that without any problems, he can work. So you fill out those forms in a way that helps you avoid denials, not expecting an approval because of how you filled it out. That took me a while to get through, but now you kind of look at the left side of the form here. 65%, almost 2/3 of the people who apply for disability benefits get denied at first. Let me say it again. 2/3 of people who apply for disability benefits are told that they are not disabled. You are not disabled. If Social Security denies you, if you fall in that 2/3, do not give up. This is me, somebody who works in this space all day, every day. I've done this for 15 years, and there's no other type of law I've ever practiced. This is everything that I've lived and breathed for a decade and a half. Do not just reapply. Do not rip up that letter and assume that, oh, they said I'm not disabled, so I must not be disabled. You have appeal rights, and you should appeal. You have 60 days to file an appeal. The first appeal is called, now, I want to talk about the time frame. That initial application that you filed, you didn't, you fill out the application. They're not going to send you a letter the next week that gives you an answer. It typically takes Social Security between 6 to 9 to give you an answer. It's really slow. Okay. If they deny you, you have to file an appeal. The appeal gets reviewed again by Social Security to determine if they can come to a different conclusion. Most people get denied a second time. Okay. Look at that statistic. Time. Same story. Don't give up. Don't just file another appeal. Or don't just file another application. File an appeal. 90% of people are denied. What you want to do is keep your claim moving forward. After you get denied a second time, you file another appeal, which is called a request for a hearing with a judge, an administrative law judge. And generally speaking, this is where people have their best chance of being approved if they're going to be approved. There's more than a 50% success rate at a hearing before a judge. And I truly believe that somebody who is demonstrably unable to work and is doing all the things that you've heard me say so far today, going to the doctors, seeking improvement, not just disability benefits. You're going to your doctor trying to get better, which means you're telling them what's wrong with you. You're telling them when the treatment doesn't work. You're telling them how your daily functioning is limited, what you can and can't do at home. You're trying, if they're saying that a medication might help you, a therapy might help you, you're trying whatever they're suggesting. If you're doing all those things, honestly, you have a very good chance of being approved if you can't work. Okay. So keep your case moving forward. But, and you see it right there in that little line at the bottom on the left side of the screen here. Timelines vary by state, but an average disability case from beginning to end through all these appeals takes about a year and a half to 2 years. These are very slow, but don't give up. There is a process here. Okay. Um, I said this at the outset, and I really want to come back to it. This presentation was for you. I've kind of thrown a lot of um, general information out here that I think is important for you guys to know, good for you to know. But I would love to see what questions we have from the audience. There, I see a question. How long does it take to hear back from your first application? Thanks for the question, Anne. It takes, I think I said this, but about 6 to 9 months on average in Ohio for Social Security to give an answer on that initial application. It's the appeals that get filed, which make an entire claim take on average up to about 18 to 24 months. What other questions do you guys have?
Michael, can
Put me
I
on.
ask, the folks that we work with often share a lot of the struggles that you talked about, but I'm curious your thoughts on the medical providers that they should be seeing. Should they be seeing their primary care physicians and working with them? Do you find that medical providers are eager to help create documentation that supports them in their disability process? How do you feel about that side of things?
Lauren, you just gave me 20 minutes of rambling, so thank you for that. Um, okay, here's how I'm going to start by answering the question. Um, every case is unique. I don't think that know, but I think that you should be receiving treatment from a specialist for every impairment that you want Social Security to consider severe. So if you have a TBI, seeing your primary care doctor and only your primary care doctor probably isn't generating the detailed treatment notes that it's going to take to be successful for a Social Security claim. Think about it this way, guys. If you're just seeing your PCP, um, you're going there complaining of a constellation of symptoms, um, which are so profound that you're unable to maintain any employment, which means, I mean, you must have a very high level of medical need, I would assume. I think it's reasonable to assume that. That doctor walks out of the room with you and walks in and treats the common cold in the next room. So if you have a TBI, and again, it can be so many different doctors, right? But I would think a neurologist at a minimum is somebody that you're seeing with some frequency. Um, maybe you're seeing a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, somebody who's documenting cognitive change and your daily functioning that way. Um, Maybe you're treating with a migraine specialist if you're having severe headaches. I don't think, and I struggle to say this because people will always say, well, they don't listen, when I go see my main doctor and I tell them what's wrong, they don't listen, so I'm stuck seeing them over and over again. Um, I think it's okay to ask for referrals to specialists if you're not improving or you're not functioning well with the treatment that you're getting. But, I think that doctors treat very symptomatically. So I think that the right doctors for you really depend upon the exact symptoms and limitations that you have. And so listen to them about where they want to direct you. Now, there was part two of your question, and I'm going to plug my social media channels a little bit here because it perfectly about 20 minutes before we signed. So if if you guys go to my TikTok account, I've got about a 250,000 followers on there. My TikTok can't, you can type in Michael Liner and I'll come right up. But it's called the Backwards Hat Barrister, or you can go to my Instagram feed, my YouTube page. It's a very similar content, but a little bit different that we put out depending upon which audience it is. But the video that I literally put out 20 minutes before we came on here, that Lauren, that wasn't a plugged question. She had no idea. Was me talking about, I think the video is titled, I'm gonna look at it right now so I can answer. The video is titled, Doctors Don't Understand Who Qualifies for Disability. That's literally the heading that's right on there. The video went up at 11:30 a.m. I signed on here about 20 minutes after that, okay? It's not just based on my assumptions about doctors in a professional context. I'll tell you who I think about are two doctors in my own family who don't understand what it means to be disabled. So many physicians think that to be disabled, it means you're like bedbound. You're unable to do anything ever. That's just not true. And what I say in the video, and I'll put this out there, is if you have symptoms that would keep you from being at work 2 days per month on a consistent basis, because you've got debilitating headaches, because you've got episodic confusion, or whatever the case might be, you are disabled under Social Security's rules. And I wish that doctors got that. I wish that doctors understood that you don't have to be completely bedbound to need Social Security disability benefits or SSI. You have to be unable to maintain consistent employment. And there are a lot of doctors who refuse to fill out paperwork or fill out even their own treatment notes in a way that supports a claim. I try and be an advocate, for the disabled. I would say my clients, but as you can tell from like what I've done on social media, it goes way beyond just fighting for my clients. I'm just fighting for what's right. But there's a lot of people who just don't get it. And I wish that doctors were forced to understand that if you are going to miss work several days per month, even if you would be totally fine the other 90% of the month, you're not going to be able to keep a job, which means you're going to either be bouncing between jobs permanently or you're going to be unemployed and underhoused, unhoused. And that's really sad. So, how do you get a doctor on board? Now, there's some tricks that I'll give you. Okay. One, don't ask your doctor to fill out disability paperwork if you think your doctor is not supportive. Ask your doctor about what limitations you should tell your employer that you would have. Say, because doctors are even the most conservative doctors who don't understand what disability looks like will still agree that you would miss work a couple days per month. They just think that FMLA will cover you. Well, not always. You know, FMLA only applies if you work for an employer who has at least 50 people that work for them. That cuts out a lot of America. Um, FMLA only applies if you've been able to work for your employer long enough to earn FMLA coverage. You have to have worked there for probably at least 6 months. What if your employer fired you because after your TBI, it took you 6, 8 months to recover and it would be undue hardship to just hold a job for you, right? A lot of people won't get FMLA coverage. So doctors misbelieving that is wrong. But if you say to the doctor, what work restriction should I ask for so that I can hopefully keep a job? Which, by the way, that's still great to know. Maybe if they're giving you good information, maybe you can find a way to work with those, restrictions. But oftentimes, what they're thinking that they're writing down that helps you prove that you can work is really proving that you can't work. So flip it. Instead of asking them about, can you support my disability case, say, can you support my ability to return to work by helping me understand what I should be telling employers so that I can hopefully not just get a job that I'm going to lose, but keep a job? What would you support? A lot of times they'll talk about, Oh, you're going to need extra breaks. You can't do an unskilled job with extra breaks. They're never going to hire you. And Social Security recognizes that. Oh, you're going to maybe need to miss work a couple times per month. You can't hold a job. So flip it. And you might have some success that way. That was a long, rambling response, like
That
I
was
promised.
perfect. Yeah, that was perfect. If you have got time for one more question, I've got one more question I'd like to pose to you. So, we run our helpline where we have folks call in from all over the state and other states as well, inquiring about things related to their brain injury. And we frequently get calls about disability and applying for disability and people completing the paperwork. And we frequently refer folks to reach out to legal consultation for the process, just for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned here today. But people are often hesitant. I can't afford to pay, to get an attorney. What's that going to look like? Can you speak to a little bit of that hesitation about involving a lawyer in that process?
Let me just come out and say before I answer that, even though obviously I am in the business of helping people get approved for disability benefits, you probably won't find in the literally thousands and thousands of pieces of content that are out there about me one place where I was like, hire me. I don't do that. I'm still going to answer your question and tell people how it works. So this isn't the call Michael Liner answer. This is how it works generally. First of all, you don't need to be able to afford a Social Security disability lawyer. The reason is that disability lawyers, by law, work on contingency, meaning they're only paid if you're approved, after you're approved, and their fee, our fee, is a percentage of the back pay. So if you're approved for disability benefits, there's a one-time check that's called a back pay check, which accounts for the period of time um, where Social Security is telling you originally that you're not disabled, but then later they agree that you were and that they were wrong, which, like I said, if you keep filing appeals, happens pretty often. Um, the attorney fee is 25% of that one-time check, right? Which means your interests are aligned with the attorney, right? They only get paid if you're successful. Pretty good deal. It's also the lowest percentage attorney fee that I've ever heard of in a legal case. Actually, I think VA disability attorneys, there's like a statutory max of like 20% of the back pay. But most attorneys, regardless of what type of case it is, the fee is a third or 40% if they go to trial. Um, in a Social Security disability case, it's 25%. There's also a max fee, no matter how much back pay you receive, and if this case takes years and you have a high, back pay amount, you could get. I mean, I've had clients get $200,000 in back pay. The attorney fee is capped. Right now, the statutory cap is $9,200. So that doesn't mean you're going to pay 9,200. You're going to pay 25%, but the 25% won't rise above being $9,200. So again, that doesn't mean call me, but that is, so to answer the question about affordability, everybody can afford one. You don't need to save up money. There's no hourly fee. It's a percentage of the back pay. Now, the question of if you should hire one, it's individualized. Again, I'm not going to sell hiring with an attorney. I think there's a good reason why there are attorneys in this space. Social Security denies most people. And if you end up having a hearing with a judge, I would want a skilled professional there to represent me who knows the law. But whether you hire an attorney is totally up to you. But, a good law firm has established processes to make this as easy for you as process. What I tell my clients is my job is to worry about this case so you can worry about your health and your treatment and getting better and, making it through your week.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And also looking at those numbers of, 65% of people being denied first time around and 90% of people being denied second time around, those are staggering statistics. Do you see trends in that no on those numbers moving upwards or downward? Do you feel like it's getting worse or better for folks?
I think right now it's actually about where it should be. I've seen a roller coaster in my career, and as we go forward, the roller coaster is going to continue because historically it always has. Um, Really, before started doing this type of work, if you go back to between 2007 and 2010, the approval rate at the ALJ hearing stage was like 75, 80%. Um, it was if you showed up to your hearing, you were probably going to win. There was, and this is I could go really deep with this, but there was one big but very well publicized case of fraud in the disability system. Um, and actually, in a lot of clients in Appalachia, Ohio, were involved, not in the fraud, they were defrauded too. It was an attorney, a judge, and a doctor who were in cahoots. And the attorney was signing up all these clients. He was referring them all to a doctor who would write a report saying they were disabled. And a judge would go into a drawer because, believe it or not, this is like 15 plus years ago when this was a more physical process, not electronic as much. The judge would go into the drawer, pull out every one of the attorney's files, and just approve them all. Um, After that was publicized, and that this is where a lot of the current rhetoric from in our current government comes from. The assumption was everybody who's applying for disability is a fraudster, even though it was one attorney, one judge, and one doctor. The approval rates went from being 75, 80% to being like 30% at a hearing. More, it actually plays a role in why had to start my own firm because the law firm that I was hired to work in out of law school, I was only there for 2 years, didn't want to keep doing social security disability because they couldn't make any money. I mean, I understood it. It was a financial decision, but the approval rates were so low that they couldn't sustain the department. So I started my own practice because I didn't want to do anything else. And it came back over time. I think right now it's about where it should be. And that's why I really believe what I said earlier. Um, so this is kind of a good conclusion because it kind of wraps everything that I've said together. If you are doing the things that I told you that you need to do during the course of our hour here, meaning you are going to a doctor, you're telling them what's wrong, not just answering their questions, but you're showing up trying to get better, meaning you're reporting the fluctuation in your symptoms, how you're trying to get better, but you're struggling at home in your daily activities. You're giving them real examples of functional loss. You're availing yourself to the process of getting better, which means you're probably accepting multiple referrals and trying different treatments. If you're doing all of that and you truly can't work, I believe that you can be approved for disability benefits. I wouldn't guarantee it because there are some ALJs, some judges who still today approve 12%. In fact, we have one of those judges here in Northeast Ohio, one of the five lowest approving judges in the United States out of 1,500 ALJs, is in the Cleveland hearing office. And she denies people every day who clearly can't work. But overall, and don't let one judge in one office scare you. Overall, if you fit what I just said, you can get the help that you need. You need to be patient, you need to be persistent, and it helps to have good help, but you can be successful with this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate you coming
Thank
on today
you.
and talking to us and sharing a lot of your knowledge with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I
I
appreciate you.
know that the folks that got a chance to watch live really appreciate it, and we'll have folks watching it afterwards as well. So thank you so much for your time today.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks. Bye.